when housing affordability worsens, homelessness shoots up. What options do these people have once they're homeless?
So there's different types of homelessness assistance types, right? There's temporary housing assistance, which helps families pay for the cost of temporary shelters. A 16-day temporary shelter includes a hotel or motel cost at $85 per day for a family of 4 or fewer, and $15 for each additional family member, up to $148 per day. And then permanent housing assistance, which helps families secure housing or prevent eviction. It could include security deposit and last month's rent, or 2 months of current rent to prevent eviction. So some of the other solutions or options that you have when you're homeless is obviously staying in a shelter, right? And so there's tons of issues with shelters, right? Safety, people steal things, there's lice, there's body lice. I've never even heard of body lice until I was doing this research. There's restricted hours, and so if you're trying to hold down a job that has you working nights, you can't stay at that shelter. And then on top of that, even if you have a day job, some of these shelters, you have to start lining up at 4 p.m., right? And so if you're not off work pre-4 p.m. to get in line, then you're not getting into that shelter. And so I've heard cases of people actually just using the shelters for, I think some shelters have storage lockers there, and they'll just use the shelter and pay for the storage locker, and so they'll lock up their stuff and then go to work, and so they know that their camping equipment and stuff like that is safe, and then they could come back and access that when they're off of work.
They have to pay for the locker?
I think, yeah, the guy was paying for the locker, right, and he was working nights. And so another thing that people are saying are the issues with shelters, right, is I think public knowledge and the perspective that I came from when I was raised was these people need to bootstrap their life and get their shit together and get a job, essentially, right? They need to figure themselves out and get a job, right? They're basically just losers.
Mm-hmm.
But you really think about it, what's some fundamental things you need to be able to hold down a job? You need an address. When you're applying for these jobs, they ask you where you live, right? And so if you don't have an address to put down and, send your first paycheck to, things like that, how are you supposed to get a job? How are you supposed to get ready in the morning, especially if you don't have a car, not only if you don't have a house, but say if you don't have a car, say if you're actually on the street, how are you supposed to get up every morning and get ready and look presentable to go into your day job, right? That's just a really hard expectation when you don't have fundamental necessities. But there's a couple other things that you're the expert on, so do you want to talk about affordable housing, because this is another option?
So I want to double back to what you said about having an address, and then I want to talk about it's really complex and it's really hard to understand what resources are available out there, even with a simple Google search, as I said before, right? So I know a person who uses the Wind Youth program in Sacramento, right? And this is basically for young adults that are at the edge of being homeless, and it provides rental assistance, and it provides other resources and a temporary shelter. So what they also provide is an address for these teens and young adults to provide so they can apply for jobs. And they have these certain mailboxes set up where it's the address for the services and then a mailbox number, and it will directly go to that young adult, so that'd help them. But if you're homeless, you lack the access to resources and
not
technology.
Just that, but say if you're homeless on the streets, on drugs, right? You now have to get clean enough to go and see a caseworker, and still a caseworker is going to be some distance away from you. Mm-hmm. And so how do you get to that caseworker to even have them explain their options, to have them start helping you, right? And I know there are caseworkers that get dispatched to help these people, but it's for a homeless person just to get to the caseworker, for them just to say, okay, here's a referral for you now to have to go across town to get to this Winded Youth place, right? Mm-hmm. I would be how am I supposed to do that, right? It's just I understand they're trying to help, but it's when you get so low, and I think programs like that are especially good at preventing homelessness, right? Which I think is what we really need to focus on, is preventing people, because once you're on the street and it gets that low and it gets that bad, it's so hard to turn around. And that's what I'm trying to get at. I want to apologize for the interruption. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It really helps out the channel and you'll never miss an episode. Thanks.
So another way to prevent homelessness is affordable housing, and affordable housing comes in many shapes and forms. And one of the things I want to talk about in terms of affordable housing, it's a preventative measure for homelessness, right? So affordable housing is designed for people living like at or below the poverty line. Mm-hmm. And there's these programs where you can rent a space. So anything that's built by affordable housing funds through HUD, like let's say an apartment, they have to dedicate certain percentage of space to low-income residents. So if we have a 100 unit apartment complex and it was built with some grant funding from HUD, then a certain amount of spaces have to be designed and left out for people living at or below the poverty line. So another thing is when a real estate developer accesses these funds, they also have to build homes that has to be provided to people with low income to afford these homes. A certain percentage of those homes built will go to low income. So
this affordable housing, is this the same thing that Governor Newsom is like talking about so much, like his campaigning for affordable housing? Is this what he's talking about?
So that's the thing. So he has something set in play where he's building these affordable housing units, but in actuality, these are units that are temporary. So a lot of these residents will go there and they're temporary. I think Safe Key is what he's trying to promote, and it's these temporary units for homelessness, to prevent homelessness so they can get back on their feet.
Something that's just like so alarming to me though is when you're talking about affordable housing units with like especially like the rentals, right? Because so
how many apartment complexes do you think actually get built every year, right? And like, why would they take into account their funding, right? I mean, you can take a percentage of the funding, but at the end of the day, the developer has to allocate the cost. Maybe they can afford to take the entire project on their own rather than take the funding, right? Usually smaller developers are the ones that are taking on this funding to develop these housing units, right? But I'm not sure, but there's new legislation that's passed that actually, like, even if you don't take funding, you have to make units for affordable housing.
Well, okay, so these rental units that are affordable, right? What does that even mean? Like, say if my rent here is $2,700, right? What would an affordable rental unit look like?
So what they do is take into account to the median income within your area, within your county, right? Let's say the median income of Sacramento is around $1,400, right? And then they're gonna ask for 30% of that. How much do you have to pay actually? Sorry.
Is that for affordable housing or for Section 8?
For affordable housing too.
Oh,
so there's a percentage for everything. So let's say affordable housing, right? You can't make over a certain percentage of the median income in that area.
Okay, and so then is that building owner, are they getting just that check, or does the government like subsidize the rest, right? Like, so say if like the rent is supposed to be $2,000 or something like that, but because it's an affordable unit, they're only getting like $1,500. Does the government pay that building owner the other $500?
So that's part of what the calculation as the developer, right? So those units have to be dedicated for low-income residents, and they'll basically at cost. Those units would be at cost. But what you're talking about is Section 8, which is an application you have to apply to for the HUD, the department you mentioned earlier. And with that, you're not guaranteeing a spot. You have to be living in lowest income poverty line, and it's usually 30% of the median income price of the area. So 30% is really, really low. And with that, it doesn't mean you're eligible. You have to apply and be on a waiting list. I've seen people wait for 2-3 years to get into the program.
Well, from my understanding too, they could wait a lot longer than that. I heard if you get in, you're just lucky. Like at this point, like I heard it's that impacted in California. Like if you get in, you're really lucky.
Yeah, it's like put on a wait list, but it's also a lottery system. So not necessarily just because you're ahead of someone else that you might get it. So,
Jesus.
So.
Okay, so what are the success rates of like affordable housing in Section 8? Like, do do we know if they're working? Are people getting off of these programs, or are they just on them for life?
So these programs are like so expansive and it's so hard to keep account.
And so once you're on Section 8, does Section 8 like follow up and ask for your W-2s every year? Like, how do they check if these people still need the spot?
So for Section 8, what they're supposed to do is check in on you and also collect your tax information. But that never really translates, right? So people are making more money, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're off Section 8. Let's say...
So when you say it doesn't really translate, do you mean that they're not collecting their taxes, or does it mean that these people are just like lying about their taxes?
They could be lying about their taxes, but they also submit their taxes, and there's no like red flag alerting system where, hey, you're violating the Section 8 requirements.
Okay, so say if you have to make 30% of the average median income,
yes,
right? Which let's say that's like 30 grand, right?
Yeah.
And so say if I cross the line and I'm making 46 grand or something like that, like say I could report it to Section 8, but there's no one there to be like, oh, you need to get out.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So another thing that same issue that happens is when you're doing these affordable housing units and you're a renter, right? So let's say you were making 30, like you were living in poverty essentially, and then you get an affordable housing unit. So let's say an affordable housing unit in Sacramento would be like $800 a month for a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment. So
no way, they're not that cheap, are they?
They are practically dirt cheap. $700.
Yeah, so like these people that are campaigning for homelessness prevention and rehabilitation, they're talking a lot about rapid rehousing. This is what I keep hearing about. This is supposed to be the next big solution for homelessness, and so I want to spend some time on this. So rapid rehousing, they'll pay around 100% of your rent if your income requires it. And this is like another thing I wanted to talk about. So the affordable housing in Section 8, do they pay 100% of your income or 100% of your rent, or is it just a certain percentage of your rent?
It's so what Section 8 is designed for is to pay a certain percentage of your rent, not the entire amount, but there's a maximum cap of the percentage that it'll pay for.
And what about affordable housing? They don't pay, well, actually affordable housing, they don't pay any of it, right?
Yeah.
And so this was something that was like kind of revolutionary for me, because I was always like thinking like, if you're on the street, right, and say if you get offered something where they're like, okay, I'll pay 2/3 of your rent, and you have to come up with the other 1/3, there's still no way for you to come up with that 1/3 and then plus utilities or plus like whatever, like you have nothing.
Yeah,
right?
you're still homeless. Right?
Yeah, you're still homeless, even though that's a great offer, right? You would still be homeless, and so this is the first thing that I've heard about where. Okay, they will pay 100% if your income needs qualify for it. Okay, so there's no eligibility restrictions or screening out households for the most likely to succeed in this program too, and that's like relatively new. They used to do that, but they stopped doing that for apparent reasons, right? And so, the rapid rehousing, it's under the Housing First approach, and the program seeks to resolve the housing crisis by providing housing and services without first addressing the preconditions such as sobriety, employment, and income. And what this means is if you're on the streets, if you're on drugs, right, they'll literally give you the keys to an apartment, and so you could go in there, start working on your mental health and rebuilding things that might help you get employed later, right? And so it's literally no qualifications needed to get in. And I know this might sound ass backwards to some people, but if you could imagine how hard working on your mental health is, or work on yourself, even when you have a home, it's extremely difficult. And so imagine trying to do those things without a house, right? And so this is like the
or
first,
without food.
Yeah, this is the first solution, like the real solution that I've like come to this problem, right? So these programs seek to provide assistance for the most vulnerable. It's finally a solution for people that have absolutely nothing and have hit rock bottom. There's a variety of rapid rehousing programs with limited time durations, anything from 3 months to 2 years. Now, 3 months isn't exactly enough time for someone to turn around their life if it's gotten really bad. But the good thing about rapid rehousing is it's really flexible and it's based on the individual's need. And so say there's some rapid rehousing programs that say like if you start off and you need 100% rental payment, they will do that, and then as you progress, say if you get a part-time job or something like that, they might ease off and only provide you 80%, right? And so these rapid rehousing programs are really flexible and evolve with the individual's needs, right? And in addition to the housing programs, they get assigned a case manager basically day one. And so they get enrolled with that case manager, and the case manager will help with anything from child services to illegal issues, poor credit, and regular housing needs. Rapid rehousing programs focus mostly on things that are barriers from preventing them from maintaining stable housing. Case managers may begin to help households gain income that would help them pay rent, right? And so really fundamental, basic things that these people need, like, again, finally a solution, right? And so the depth of the rental subsidy could vary with this program, a fixed amount, and so some programs provide a fixed amount to all households, and then others do the sliding amount.
So these rapid rehousing programs, they're destined to be short-term, right? They're basically temporary housing options for homeless or like people near homelessness, which ranges from 3 to 2 years. Mm-hmm. So right after they have to move out, or?
So there's 3 outcomes that happen after somebody enters into rapid rehousing, right? So you move in, right, and you exit to permanent housing, right?
That's idealistic.
Yeah, it's just like basically you move into, so the rapid rehousing, they call them like permanent housing because it's like an actual house, and it's like not a shelter, and so they define it as permanent housing. So you move into permanent housing. No continuation of rapid rehousing assistance is necessary, like maybe you only needed like a deposit or something like that, and then you exit into permanent housing, right? And so that's like very idealistic. Then another approach is that you would move into permanent housing, continue with rapid rehousing assistance, like short-term rental assistance, right, and then exit into permanent housing. And then the third option, you move into permanent housing, continue with rapid rehousing assistance, leave so they would be unable to attain permanent housing even still while in the rapid rehousing program, and then they would exit into homelessness or into temporary housing. And it says that this is a very rare occurrence on rapid rehousing programs.
But honestly, I distrust this data. The homeless lady I interviewed said she went into rapid rehousing, and then when her program ended, because she had been in it for 1.5 years, and so her time ran out, but they still wanted her to sign the papers to say that she was a success story. Even though she had no job and couldn't continue to pay, they still tried to get her to sign the papers to say she was a success story. And she speculated that one of these reasons was to get rapid rehousing more funding, because they also had her go to talks and like present. And her story was really powerful because she was a homeless college student, right? And so that like motivated people to donate.
So I got on rapid rehousing through AOL, and they paid 2/3 of my rent. Why pay 1/3 of it? They didn't have the funding for it.
So they expected you to pay the full day of this.
And I couldn't. So I told them, look, man, I can't even finish paying this rent. So you guys, how do you guys see me as a success? I don't have a job to continue paying. Yeah. It was like, as soon as you guys stop paying, I'm going to be homeless again. Yeah. So I didn't sign that paper. So then I went back to sleeping in a car.
And so I just really question the validity of the success rate that they're claiming, and then when there's a bunch of different rapid rehousing programs, are they really collecting all the data there is out there?
But like, why not just disclose what's happening, right? Why is it really hard to like give information, like tick information? Hey, people that came in.
Well, so there's a bunch of different rapid rehousing programs, right? They're just.
That just adds more to confusion, though, right? It's like I have to apply here, I have to apply there, I have to apply everywhere.
No, well, you only have to apply to one, right? But it's which rapid rehousing program is available to you, which one best fits your needs, right? Like, because some of these might only pay your deposit and maybe first month's rent.
But as a homeless person, like you're saying, right? It's like the path of least resistance, the closest one to you, right? Mm-hmm. But there's always
the success rate of rapid rehousing, right? That's something that you're trying to get at.
Yeah.
Right. And it gets challenging to measure the outcomes of the rapid rehousing program, right? So there's some areas with lower vacancy rates, say 3% in California, and so a property might stay vacant for 3% out of the year, versus areas with, say, 15% vacancy rate, right? The people that live in the 3% vacancy rate will struggle more to find housing, right? That's innate, fundamental, basic, right? Because there's less housing available for them to get into.
Supply and demand.
Yeah, they are going to struggle to find housing the most. And And so when you talk about rapid rehousing success, right, if someone lives in that 3% area, they're more likely to fail than people that live in the 15% vacancy area. Also, factors like access to transportation or depressed community economics play a factor. Say if you live in Detroit that has a more depressed economy than, say, Tucson, Arizona, right, you're also going to struggle more than that person that lives in Tucson, Arizona. However, the results of rapid rehousing are mostly good. They show anywhere from 60 to 70% are exiting into permanent housing. And so far, this has been the best solution, but it's probably also one of the most expensive solutions, right?
So, like you mentioned, vulnerable people. Who are these?
The demographics of California homelessness population is disproportionately Black. Black people are overrepresented nearly a 5-fold in homelessness population. And then to make it worse, it doesn't get much better. Like American Indians and Alaska Natives are overrepresented as well, right? Can I say that Asians are doing the best? Asians make up about 15% of the California's population, and maybe like something like 30% of them are homeless.
Discipline.
Something that I hear the Republican Party saying a lot is that white people are the highest percentage that are incarcerated and also are on the streets, right? And if you're looking at raw numbers, yeah, that is true. White people are 70% of the population, and then they're 50% or over 50% of the homeless population, right? But when you take into consideration like the percentage of white people that are part of California, right, those numbers just don't compare.
So it's a disproportionate representation of African Americans.
Exactly, right? So Black people are overrepresented, again, 5-time-fold of the homeless population.
If you're African American, you're more likely to be homeless than if you're any other race.
It blows my mind. I cannot even begin to express how much it pisses me off when people pull that statistic. Well, they're like, oh, well, actually, did you know that white people are the most incarcerated and the most on the streets? And it's like, yeah, no shit. When we make up 70% of the population, of course that makes sense that 50% of our homeless population, well, I mean, it's still a sad fact. I don't think anyone should be homeless, but it's like you guys are pointing the finger that it's like, oh, we need to support white people, and it's like, if you're Black, you have a higher chance of going to jail. You have a higher chance of being on the streets. You have such a discrepancy in the way the data is presented to support their political agenda.
So basically, you're disadvantaged if you're African American. The fact that you're African American, statistically, you're disadvantaged. Let's talk about women. What about the female to male population?
Something that I was really curious about when I was doing this research is, what does it look like for women? I assumed that there would be less women on the streets, but they were going to be sexually assaulted and abused a lot more than, say, a male would. And so I looked into this. And can you read the quote I just sent you about?
So it says that in California alone, apparently 65% of the homeless population in California is male, and 33.4% are female, and 1.2% are transgender, and then 0.4% are gender non-conforming.
A larger percentage is male. But okay, what about the sexual assault and violence, right? Like, how much of a social issue is this? And so while sexual assault statistics affect the entire homeless population, the data shows that women and youth are particularly susceptible to sexual assault while living on the streets. Research by the National Sexual Violence Resource Center shows that 1 to 3% of the general youth population report sexual assault. 21 to 42% of youth that are homeless report sexual assault. 1 in 3 teens are lured into prostitution within 48 hours of living on the street. 1 in 3 homeless youth engage in survival sex. The experience of violence in the lives of homeless women, a research reported, showed that 78.3% of homeless women in the study had been subjected to rape, physical assault, or stalking. And so 56% had been raped and 73% had been physically assaulted. Okay, those who experience the sexual assault while homelessness also lack the legal, medical, and mental health services, which can worsen the post-traumatic effects of an assault. And so it's literally, again, some of the most vulnerable people that have a lack of access to help, right? And these are the people that are getting assaulted at the highest rates. Well, again, like the real issue is that no one should be on the streets, right? That's
Yeah,
a real
that
issue.
is the real issue.
Right. I'm not here to debate like should women get more housing or if males should get it. It's like everyone should get housing, right?
Yeah.
So how do we make that happen?
But if I was homeless, I would be blindsided, right? I don't know what resources are out there, and it's probably hard to figure out. Like a simple Google search will alleviate most of the things, but then like I feel like it's just too complex. Like it should be as simple as find the assistance that we have in the area.
Well, something that I want to talk about too is how these nonprofits that we always hear about aren't really trying to help solve homelessness. Like they kind of just again perpetuate the issue. Like
Loaves and Fishes didn't have a doctor. They didn't have any really resources for homeless other than they gave you a meal and they gave you a referral to other outside resources, which and you can Google yourself or see any social worker anywhere basically and get that information. So a lot of funding was going to this organization that did not help homelessness out of homeless. And if you've got people and you're not really addressing what made them homeless, they're still doing what they did.
they're just surviving homelessness.
They're just surviving homelessness.
These shelters, if they were really trying to solve homelessness, wouldn't there be more flexibility with how you could come in, or a separation with people that are on drugs and people that aren't on drugs, like something that provides them more safety, right? Like there's lots of other things at play that can make those better that isn't being done. Soup kitchens and stuff like that, right? Like you're just providing them a meal, you're just helping them survive homelessness, but it doesn't help them get out of homelessness. And so like I would like to see more well-rounded programs that help these people actually progress instead of staying stagnant in homelessness.
So what's interesting with what you said is, right, it perpetuates homelessness. What if homelessness was never seen, like shelters wasn't ever seen as a way to solve homelessness? It's more of a way to like enrich someone else. From an article I put up, I found it's in New York City, one of the largest owners of a homeless shelter in New York made $1 million in profit. $1 million in profit. And it's served under the guise of a nonprofit. And you know how we know about nonprofits, right? So Sutter Health is a nonprofit, and they've been expanding their health services and overpaying for everything, right? So they're a nonprofit, but...
So something that I potentially want to do another episode on is how bullshit nonprofits are. And so nonprofits fundamentally can operate just as businesses do, with multiple streams of income, but then they could also get additional incomes from grants and from donations, right?
Yeah.
And they could, I think their CEOs can get 10% of whatever income they have, right? That's like the limitation on it. But it's like, if you look up like Goodwill's CEO's income, he makes like $700K a year or something like that, and I think that was before inflation got crazy, so he's probably making a lot more now. Like these things are just money hungry, just like the rest of our capitalist society is. But
they're businesses.
But under the guise that they're helping people or solving social issues.
Did you know that NFL is a nonprofit?
I did not know that. That's a fun fact.
But like going back to that person that owns a homeless shelter in New York, he manages the own security guards for that shelter. He manages the catering company for that shelter and the management company for shelter, and then he bills the city of New York for those services. So he could be providing the least amount of services in terms of security guards. Let's say he had 4 security guards, right? There's no way for the city to check there was actually 4 security guards as opposed to 2. And you can charge at a ludicrous rate, right? So maybe homeless shelters aren't really serving their purpose. They're more for profit.
Well, I think a counter argument to that would be is that all these nonprofits are really just trying to play their part, is I think what the argument is, right? Like, so say soup kitchens, they're like, yeah, I just feed people and I expect these caseworkers to like help them get off the street, something like that, right?
Wow,
And so
that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, they do really play their part, right? You want rapid rehousing, you go here. You want a shelter, you go here. You want food, you go to soup kitchen, right? So
Yeah, again, the disconnect, and I would like to see more programs that have all of those resources in one place, right? And I actually do know.
sounds like communism.
I actually do know one nonprofit
Yeah?
that is all resources in one place. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Good day.